Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good number of different styles, and I would count this brewery among my favourite Scottish breweries, so it's always nice to review the new beers from these guys when I'm back in the motherland of Scotland. So the one that we're going to have a look at today is a style that we have had from these guys before. It's one that I know they do very well, and I have to say I'm very curious to see how this one turns out. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to Galashiels in the Scottish Border region, and that means that we're going to have a look at another beer from Tempest Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Altered Air. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is an American IPA according to Untappd. Tempest just call it an IPA, of course, but I think this one is going to be a little bit more on the bitter side of things. But it does say it has oats in it, so yeah, I think it should be quite interesting, this one. So yeah, we've had really good IPAs from Tempest in the past, so let's crack on and see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tempest Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add some more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to very regular at the moment because I am at home in the motherland of Scotland. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Tempest Brewery once again then. So Tempest Brewery, Tempest Brewing Company, whatever you want to call them, was founded back in 2010 by Gavin and Anika Meiklejohn. So Anika trained as a chef in New Zealand, but then the couple returned to Scotland in 2007 to run the Cobbles Bar in Kelso together. But Gavin had previously worked for Whistler Brewing Company in British Columbia over in Western Canada, and so he had an appreciation for craft beer, and he'd taken some brewing courses during his time in Sydney, Australia as well, and he actually homebrewed in his garage in Wellington in New Zealand using a 50-litre brew kit for quite some time. Wellington, New Zealand, of course, is a very well respected beer city and a place that I do hope to visit at some point in the next couple of years and do some out and about videos and things like that. There's a great beer scene in New Zealand for those of you guys who do not know that, so check them out, check out the Kiwi beers. But Gavin was joined in the early days at the brewery by Alan Rice, who acts as the business development manager, and he'd previously worked for Stewart Brewing, who are from Lonehead in the south of Edinburgh, and he'd also spent a bit of time in New Zealand and Australia as well. But the brewery was originally housed in old dairy buildings in Kelso, and the brewery kit that they had there was largely homemade, and it was engineered to produce big flavoured beers on a really kind of shoestring budget. But their beers proved to be very popular, and so they moved to their current and bigger home in the Tweedbank Industrial Estate in Galashiels. In June of 2019, they submitted plans to build a new brewery building with a bar and restaurant on the site of the former Eldon Mill, which is very close to the new Tweedbank train station. And I'm not sure exactly how far along they are with that at the moment, but I think everything is kind of still in the works. A lot of stuff was put on hold, of course, because of the whole COVID-19 pandemic actually, but I think they are still moving forward with that as far as I know. But as of November 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced in the region of 130 different kinds of beer, and you'll get a variety of different styles from these guys. Probably my favourite beers that I've had from them over the years would be the Brave New World, the West Coast IPA. That's very nice. I've heard that Longer White Cloud is a very good one, and they rebrewed that recently, but unfortunately when I went into Beer Hive in Edinburgh, the cans weren't delivered, unfortunately. But yeah, they've also got the Old Parochial, which is, I think, one of the best Scottish brewed Scotch ales actually, so that is definitely worth checking out. if you get the chance. But other than that, just try the new beers that you get from these guys, because they always tend to be pretty damn solid actually. A very good brewery in my experience, and I did enjoy the Modern Hellas, which was my last review that I did from them as well actually. So they are a capable lager brewery as well as an ale brewery. So yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Tempest Brewing Company for the moment. One of my favourite breweries here in Scotland, as I mentioned earlier. But if you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done, and I'm sure we will review more from them in the future as well. So yeah, let's crack on then and get the beer opened up and everything like that. So just before we do that, let you have a little look at the artwork on this one a wee bit more closely. So as you can see, once again, very, very nice artwork from Tempest Brewery. If we zoom in a little bit, the colours on this one are a little bit difficult to see, I guess, in this light. But there you can see it, Tempest Brewing Company, and on the back of the can you also have this symbol here, the lightning bolt, in the pint glass, which I do quite like. I do like that symbol that they use. But yeah, it also tells you a little bit about the beer as well. So it says on the side here, the altered state that exists between the end of summer and the start of autumn, when light dips and the air freshens, is the backdrop of our latest seasonal release. A big hit of citrus is a reminder of brighter days, while on the other side of the solstice are the flavours of autumnal pine, berries and green pepper. Breathe in the altered air that fills the space between. So yeah, looks pretty good. But yeah, as I said earlier, this one is a 6.5% IPA. It's listed on Untappd as an American IPA, which quite often means West Coast, but sometimes, you know, sometimes these are being called California IPAs these days. But yeah, I do expect this one to be on the kind of bitter side of things a little bit more. But the hops in this beer are Equinox, Citra and Mosaic, all of which we are familiar with. All of these hops, I believe, come in at about 14% alpha acid. They're all American. Equinox is going to give you a lovely big oily limey character. Citra is going to give you the big juicy mango and quite a lemony limey kind of character too, in a sort of more hazy IPA, but it can give you a wee bit more of a kind of gooseberry note in a more West Coasty type thing. So we'll need to see exactly how this beer turns out in its malt base, but it also has Mosaic as well, as we said, so that gives you a nice big kind of juicy oily tangerine sort of thing. But the malt base in this one is Golden Promise, Flake Bar and oats, so I think it should be quite nice actually. That's quite a common, well, the oats and the Golden Promise are quite common things when it comes to New England IPAs. So yeah, we'll just need to see how we go with this one. But this beer, it's a 440ml can. I bought this at the Caledonian Craft Beer Merchant along in Dunfermline, and I think it cost me in the region of like £5.50 or something like that. So that translates to roughly about €6.50 perhaps, so about 65 Swedish kroner, and then I guess somewhere in the region of, what's that going to be, about $7.50 American, just so that those of you watching in different parts of the world have a little bit of a price reference for this one. But yeah, just say 440ml can, the Altered Air from Tempest Brewing Company down in Galashiels, 6.5% IPA. Let's get this guy out and we'll have a look at it then and see how we go. So, get this guy out and into the glass. Now, one thing about Tempest actually was it was quite, for a long time, it was actually quite difficult to get a hold of the beers from Tempest unless you went through to Edinburgh. If you were lucky, you could get them in Glasgow. But these days, I'm noticing there's more and more craft beer shops kind of popping up, which is great, and they seem to have a better selection of the Scottish beers these days. I think there's more and more distribution of Scottish beers within the country today, which is very nice to see. So long may that continue. It's a lot easier to get the Tempest beers than they used to be, but you do have to remember that this is still a very small company. I think they only employ about 7 or 8 people, if I remember correctly. I think it was Fraser and Beerhive in Edinburgh that was telling me that they are, for how long they've been around, nearly 11 years, 12 years actually. These guys are still pretty damn small. But yeah, anyway, as you can see, this beer has poured with about, I would say, about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say, perfect white head there. I'll just let the camera zoom in on that there. There you go. You can see a lovely, nice kind of small bubbles, but that's just fading away very quickly to be a nice thin foamy layer, but there is a significant ring just around the edge of the glass there. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the edge of the glass there, but not too much carbonation visible in this one. And as you can see, it's poured a lovely, very kind of bright yellow colour, this one. I would say that it's kind of akin to like mango juice or something like that. But yeah, remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. And any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, can also affect the colour of your beer as well. But when it comes to a kind of regular IPA like this, you don't often have to care about those 2 particular variables. But the level of haze on this one looks pretty good. You can see it has got more of a kind of naturally hazy vibe to it than an all-out kind of foggy, soupy gloopy type thing that you're going to get from a full-on New England IPA. As I tell you all the time, the level of haze in these beers really depends on the yeast, and in this case it's also going to be the oats that affect that as well. But this is mainly a barley malt beer in a sense. But yeah, it certainly looks the part actually. So yeah, it does look a little bit more like a West Coasty, or yeah, an American IPA. American IPA seems to be a little bit of a kind of generic term these days when a beer is kind of in between the big hazy things from New England and the more kind of caramelly biscuity things from California and the West Coast and stuff like that. So yeah, it certainly looks the part as to what you would expect from an American IPA, I guess we could say. Nothing surprising about the appearance. But let's have a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. I'm really curious about this actually, and all the hops in this beer, as I said earlier, are ones that we are familiar with. So let's look at it. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely a little bit more of a kind of old school IPA, this one. I mean, what I'm going to say about it straight away is that it's not the most pungent of beers in terms of its aroma, and it does strike me as being a little bit more kind of West Coasty and things like that actually, which is quite nice. I do miss the West Coast IPAs. You know, there's so many hazy IPAs out there these days that you can become a wee bit tired of them, in honesty. So it is nice to have a little bit of variety, I would say. But yeah, the green component of this one does have a little bit of that kind of deeper resinous type thing to it, so that's quite nice as well. It's got some lovely more kind of oily fruity characters to it as well, and the malt base is quite smooth, but it does have a slight degree of sweetness to it. So that's a basic overview of the aroma here. It does lean a little bit more towards the West Coasty side of things in a lot of ways, but the malt base does have an element of that more New Englandy type vibe to it. So yeah, let's break down the aroma for you a little bit more in depth and see what we get. Yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty nice actually. So straight away with this one, you can smell a lovely little bit of a kind of bread crusty backbone in there, and the bread crust almost smells just a little bit more kind of oily. But I think that for me, that's the main difference between the New England malt bases and the more West Coasty ones. The West Coasty ones tend to be a little bit more kind of oily and slightly sweeter and almost a bit boozier in their character as well, and you definitely get all of that in this one. So yeah, there is a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty character in there for sure. I definitely get a wee bit of white bread, but on top of that, you can smell the smoothness and slight sweetness from the oats, I would say. So the oaty character comes across as really quite nice and smooth. And again, the more and more that you smell of this beer, in that regard, the kind of sweeter it gets. The oats give you a really nice kind of smooth character, but they come across as a little bit more oily in this one. And I would say that that is most likely due to the Golden Promise in this one. So yeah, the Golden Promise is the one I think that's going to give you a lot of sweetness and that sweet presence in this beer. So yeah, it smells very, very nice. Yeah, I think, yeah, on the how would we say, on the sweet side of the malt base then, on top of all that nice kind of bready character, and I would hasten to add that the bready character comes across as quite compact and quite dense, but it still has a wee bit of a kind of graininess to it as well, I would say. But yeah, on top of that, you've got a little bit of, there's definitely a wee touch of sweet caramel to this one, but I do get a bit of that kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing for sure. And again, I think that's down to Golden Promise in this one for sure. But yeah, lovely biscuity qualities coming out of this beer. Oddly, the aroma of this one actually reminds me of some of the slow burn and more a slow burn beer actually that I've had from Copenhagen recently. So have you ever come across Slow Burn Brewing Cooperative from Copenhagen? Very new and upcoming brewery. This one really reminds me of some of the stuff that I've had from them in the past. But yeah, malty base on this one I think is really nicely done. A bit more, just as I say, dense bread, wee bit of bread crust, a little bit of a kind of sweet caramelly note, also a bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuit, and then you've also got a bit of that kind of Werther's Original type quality underneath. So yeah, the way that this goes together, I think, is very, very nice from the malty perspective. It works really, really well. So yeah, I think that it goes together nicely in the malt base. I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about that side of the beer. So let's focus on the green component then before we taste it, and the fruits. So on the green side of things, there's definitely a wee touch of earthiness to this one, and I would say that's most likely to come from Mosaic. Mosaic is the one out of the three hops, the Citra, the Equinox, Mosaic. It's the one that's most likely to give you just that wee bit of earthiness. Now, you definitely get a nice little bit of a kind of pine resiny character from this one. It's not too pungent, but you can smell that it's got a really nice deep aroma there, so it's quite well rounded actually. So I really like that about this beer, and that big pine, that sort of piney resin note that it has just sitting deep down gives you the wee bit of dankness, and again that's something that you would normally associate with the West Coast IPAs. Now remember that West Coast IPAs tend to use a little bit more early edition hop, and the early edition hops of course are the ones that tend to give you the bigger bitterness actually, so bear that in mind. New England IPAs tend to have more kind of late edition hops within the last half hour of the wort boil, and also dry hopping as well. West Coast IPAs also have those, but that's a big part of the reason for the lower bitterness that you find in New England IPAs. But this one has a bit of that old school dankness, and it's really nice. I can see actually, they say on this one it's got a little bit of green pepper to it, and I can see exactly what they mean. It does have a wee bit of that kind of spicy thing to it, but I don't think I would have picked that up without the power of suggestion from the can, to be honest with you. I would have said it was pine resin. I never really look for peppery kind of aromas in beer, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's aroma wise it is nice in that sense. What I would also say is that the grassy character in this beer is quite nice and bright and zesty, and I think probably it's more likely that the Equinox and the Citra are the ones that are contributing that. I'd be curious to know when exactly they added the hops during the wort boil on this, if one of them was used as the bittering hop, or if it was a 33 mixture, if you like, between the three. But yeah, the grassiness out of this is really nice and quite bright. So let's round it off with a look at the fruity side of things. Yeah, I mean, for me it's actually kind of what you would expect, to be honest, from these hops. So definitely you get a little bit of that wee pungent passion fruity note from the Citra in there, and you've got a nice oily mango. You can really smell the more oily characters. I always find that in these more West Coasty type, this isn't a full West Coast IPA, in these more West Coasty type IPAs, when you've got a bit more sweetness in the malt base, you tend to get those more oily fruity characters, and it just comes across as a wee bit more boozy. So Citra is showing you its kind of more oily side in this one, as are all the hops incidentally. But yeah, for me there's a wee bit of that pungent passion fruit in there. It does round out though to be a more oily mango, but you get a lovely kind of oily lime backbone to this one as well, which is great. And then you've also got that nice big tangerine orange from the Mosaic in this one. They were saying sort of berries and things like that. So yeah, I don't really get berries out of it, to be honest. I get more of a kind of, for me it's more of a kind of, as I say, I get quite a nice oily mango out of it, a bit of passion fruit, as I say. The orange, I think the tangerine orange from the Mosaic gets sweeter and sweeter actually, and then you've also just got that nice big oily limey character underneath from the Equinox. Maybe there's a wee teeny bit of pineapple in there, and for me Mosaic can give you some of that, but it can also give you a wee bit of a blueberry note as well actually. But yeah, lovely smelling beer, I have to say, but definitely leaning more towards that kind of West Coasty sort of thing. It reminds me of a few of the ale farm beers that I've had from Kogia in Denmark as well. So yeah, it's interesting comparisons with this beer, I have to say, but I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one then. So yeah, this one is the Altered Air, a 6.5% American IPA apparently, from Tempest Brewing Company in Galashiels down in the Borders. Cool to return to these guys. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, it's pretty solid, yeah, absolutely. And I can see what what they mean with it being a little bit more kind of bitter and things. That's what I was told about this beer, is that it was a little bit more on the bitter side of things. And it is to be honest with you, it's on the first taste, I would say it's a little bit indistinct whether it leans more towards the West Coast or the New England. But yeah, definitely a more kind of bitter IPA. This one leans towards the kind of bready side of things as well, and the fruity notes are a bit old school. But I mean, Equinaut, Citra, Mosaic, these hops have been around for quite a wee while, so they are hops that we know well. But yeah, another solid beer from Tempest. Isn't my favourite IPA that I've had from these guys. I still think Marmalade on Rye is a little bit difficult to beat, to be honest with you, or Brave New World. Those are really solid, and of course there's the nostalgia factor in there as well. So yeah, that is one of the other things that I need to think about when I'm trying Tempest beer. But I think this is pretty damn solid, and it is nice and drinkable actually. I think it's one of the lighter IPAs that I've had from Tempest over the last wee while, but it gets a thumbs up from me for sure. It's a nice beer, and you can't really ask for much more than that these days, because there's so many beers on the market. But yeah, I would say it does get a little bit kind of juicier and things the later on, the more that you drink of it. So yeah, a thumbs up from me in that regard actually. But let's break down the flavour of this one for you and just describe it a wee bit more in depth if you like. So straight away across the middle of your palate then, you can feel this beer. It's kind of interesting because the graininess is a little bit more kind of prominent, and it mixes in well with the whole kind of pine resiny type vibe of this. If I was tasting this, I would actually wonder if they'd put some pine needles or some spruce tips or something like that in this. Although if it was spruce tips, it would be potentially a little bit smoother and oilier than it is in a sense. I've had some really nice spruce tip beers from Pojala in Estonia actually. It's quite a popular thing over there to put spruce tips in non-alcoholic beers, and it works really well in fact. But yeah, this one is just a bit deeper and more resinous, and it's really nice. It's a bit of a throwback to some of the more old school beers for sure. So yeah, straight away then across the we'll focus on the malty side of things, of course. We'll do the middle third of your palate. So yeah, you get that nice kind of bread crusty backbone there. And as I say, you get the bit of the pine resin and stuff just mixing in with that, but you also get the graininess there. And I think the graininess comes out a little bit more the further that you go into the aftertaste. On top of that, I think there's a very thin layer of a kind of brown bready character there, and I think that's the flaked kind of barley that's in this one actually. So I think that's what's going on here. It's just giving you a wee bit of that more kind of grainy thing. So I think in some ways this is kind of like some of the winter IPAs that we've had in the past. I believe it was Winter Frontier we had from Toil a number of years back. Yeah, that was a really good one actually. But yeah, nice kind of wintry. It's just got that nice kind of grainy wintry sort of thing to it for sure, which I really enjoy. And then on top of that, you get a bit of the smoother white bready character, but that takes a wee bit of time to come out actually. What I would say about the malt base in this one is that generally speaking, it comes across as being quite crisp. And of course, that's a wee bit different when you consider all the New England IPAs these days, which are big and smooth and kind of thick actually. So yeah, this one is a wee bit different, but it's nice to have different things. It tests your palate. So yeah, bread crust, little touch of brown bread in there, and a wee bit of a kind of more crisp fresh white bread, and then on top of that you get a kind of circle, and you can feel the smoothness of the oats. The oats aren't too thick in this one actually, but they come across and they just smoothen out the whole of that middle third of your palate actually, which is very nice. So on the in the very dead centre of your palate, it's interesting because there is a wee bit of sweetness in there, and again, as I've said, there's golden promise in this beer, and it's interesting to try it in a slightly more West Coasty type IPA. I can't remember how often I would have had golden promise in West Coasters before all the New Englands appeared. That's an interesting point, but that's for another day. But if you go to the dead centre of your palate, you can feel a little bit of that concentrate. It's like a strong biscuity flavour. It's not quite caramel, but it's like a strong concentrated McVitie's Digestive biscuity, oily kind of note in there. And that's where the kind of boozy part of the beer is. The brown sugars usually cover up the boozy side of the beer, if you like. So you can feel that in the dead centre of your palate. Then as you just move a little bit further out toward the edge, it gets a little bit more kind of, yeah, McVitie's digestive and biscuity like actually. So you can feel those McVitie's digestive biscuity notes as you just go out towards the edge of your palate. And I think that works really nicely. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to say about the middle third of your palate in this one. So let's focus on the back third of your tongue then. So border region between middle and back third, you get a little bit of bready build up there again, a wee bit of that brown bready sort of thing, and a stronger bread crust. But the base of the back third of your palate, again, you've got that bread crusty note there, the graininess gets a bit more intense. You can feel that the brown bread and the white bready layers are a little bit thicker in a sense. And you do get, I don't think there's much more than that in terms of the oats. I don't think the oats really kind of come across into that back third of your palate, but on top of that there is a nice little bit of a kind of yeasty, doughy sort of thing. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this beer. You can feel that slightly more dense, bready, doughy, yeasty kind of thing coming out of this, which I think is really good. So yeah, the way that goes together is pretty nice. So, I think, yeah, the yeasty character in this one's actually quite smooth, which is interesting. Quite often you get a wee bit of a kind of spicy character out of the yeasty side of things, but for me it's quite a smooth white bready dough and a little bit crackery in a sense. So yeah, that's sitting on top of the kind of white bready layer in the back third of your palate. And remember, the breadiness at the back of your palate is a bit more grainy too. But when you start at the back of your palate, you can feel the flavours a little bit taller. It's just a little bit taller there, and as you move further forward, it just condenses down a wee bit. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, the beer is actually quite crisp in the way that the malt base comes out, and I think that suits the overall vibe of the beer, the slightly bigger graininess and the crispness of it. And yeah, we'll focus on the green side of things now with the hops. So back corners of the palate, definitely a little bit earthy. As I said earlier, I suspect there's a little bit of most of that is probably coming from the mosaic, but as you move further forward, you can feel that quite quickly it develops that sort of piney, resinous, dank sort of thing. All three of the hops, it's three in this one, all three of the hops in this beer are capable of giving you that kind of piney, resinous dankness. It depends when you add them in the boil, so I think there is a good bit of early edition hop has gone into this to give you that. So yeah, you can feel that nice big kind of piney, resinous character to this one for sure, and that lingers the further that you go into the aftertaste. Round the front curve of the palate though, pardon me, it's a little bit lighter, and it is a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say, and it does have a wee bit of zestiness the further you go into the aftertaste. But actually the grassy character in this beer is a little bit wetter than I was expecting it to be from the aroma, which is kind of interesting. But let's look at the fruity part of the beer. I think we've described the green component as much as we can. So yeah, front third of your palate then. Border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up there. There is a bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of thing. There's a bit of brown bread, but then the base of the front third of your palate, it has got a bit of the kind of brown wholemealy bread, but then it's quite smooth and white bready on top, and then you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, it is kind of what I would expect from these three hops, to be honest with you. At the back of that front third of your palate, you get that more pungent passion fruity note there. I could maybe go as far as being as grapefruit. I actually think if I was to try this beer blind without knowing the hops, I might suspect there was a wee bit of Chinook in this, because you do get the grapefruit and you get that piney resin, and Chinook was always good at giving you that. But yeah, Citra can do that as well. So there is I would say there's a little touch of grapefruit there, but as you come further forward, it mellows out to be a bit more of a kind of oily passion fruit. Then as you reach the midpoint, of that front third of your tongue, there's definitely a bit more of a kind of oily, more oily, mango-y character to this beer. So yeah, it goes together. It does go together pretty well in that sense, actually. It shows off Citra pretty nicely, but then the front half of the front third of your palate is all about the other two hops. So yeah, you can feel the base of this one. It's definitely got that nice big oily limey character, and as you reach the very kind of front tip of your tongue, you can feel Citra showing a little bit of its lemon limey side too. You get quite a bit of zest on the very front tip of the tongue, but on top of that you get a little bit of the kind of tangerine orange from the mosaic. But I think the mosaic takes a bit of a back seat to the other hops in this one. Yeah, I think I think it's only when the liquid's on your tongue that you'll get a wee bit of the orange out of this. I actually find this beer to be quite, you know, passion fruity, mangoey, and then limey. The lime really lingers there for me in this one. The mosaic, I think, does take a wee bit of a back seat actually, but it's nice. It showcases the hops. Quite interesting this one, but I'm saying that about the mosaic, but the further you go into the aftertaste, I do think it maybe shows a wee touch of orange actually. But yeah, I think mosaic does take a bit of a back seat to the other ones. But yeah, this is nice. Let's round off the review with a look at the mouthfeel then. So I would say that this beer is mid-bodied. It's right in the middle of the spectrum. The carbonation does have a degree of crispness to it as well, which I think suits the beer overall, and it's quite a clean and, in a sense, slick beer, this one actually. It has got a little bit more of a West Coast type mouthfeel to it, I would say, and again, I think that's amplified a little bit by the cleanliness of the Scotch water. I always say we're proud of our tap water in Scotland. But yeah, in terms of the IBUs, I think this one's got to be about a 50 or 60 IBU beer, this one. I wouldn't be surprised. Certainly does have a wee bit more bitterness to it. I would want to say about 60 IBUs for this, but always take my IBU counts with a pinch of salt because it's my weakest point of reviewing beer. But the malt base, as I've said to you, is quite smooth. It has got a bit of graininess to it, but the smoothness does come out a bit more the more that your palate gets used to the beer, and you have got some of the graininess lingering into the aftertaste. You've got a wee touch of sweetness in there as well, and as I've said, the fruity character is quite nice. It's got a bit of a pungent citrusy note from the tropical side of the beer, but the tropical side mellows out, and you have got quite a zesty side from the more citrusy lemon limey element of this beer. But overall, it is quite a nice one, this. It does lean more towards the West Coasty side of things stylistically, but it has got an element of that New England malt base there. It does have a wee bit of the smoothness you'd expect of a New England. So yeah, calling it an American IPA, which is a bit of a neutral term, I think is probably wise in this case. So Untappd have called it right, I think, there. But yeah, it's worked out really nicely, this one. So I'm glad I got the chance to review this beer. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this was the Altered Air, a 6.5% American IPA from Tempest Brewing Company in Galashiels in the Scottish Border region. Really nice and a bit old school and pine resiny. So yeah, pick this one up while you can. I don't think this is going to be around for all that much longer. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tempest Brewing Company, and we will return to these guys at some point soon. I do have another beer of theirs in the fridge to have a little look at. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Slàinte, Skål, cheers. Make sure you check out Tempest Brewing Company from Galashiels here in Scotland.